Helen broke the tension at the dining table after the heated argument between her and her husband's younger brother, Kenneth. The ferocious dragons couldn't keep their calm despite their best efforts. She began asking Sophie about her day at school, and Sophie, unlike her usual temperament, replied softly and in a sweet tone. Sophie knew that the argument had gone way too far. Jacob ate quietly and listened to their conversation. He noticed how alike Sophie and her mother looked. Usually, Sophie had a short temper and Helen was the cool and composed one. But today, it seemed that they had switched roles. Kenneth, on the other hand, ate his food noisily, still trying hard to suppress his displeasure for Jacob. Sophie's father, Dracon, seems to be a wise man with good leadership skills. Kenneth, his brother, in contrast, seems reckless and stubborn. He was poles apart from his older brother. He has handsome features just like Dracon, but his constant grouchiness is probably the reason for his ghastly appearance. Jacob judged the man quietly as he ate his food. Sensing Jacob's judgment, Kenneth raised his head and suddenly glared at Jacob. His bloodshot eyes scared him, and he didn't look up even once after that glare. Sophie and Helen were done talking by the time dinner was over, and they began to clear the table. Helen asked Sophie to go upstairs with Jacob to study, and they both understood that she wanted them to spend time together. But Sophie wasn't in the mood and said, "I just finished eating, Mom. I still want to watch a bit of TV." "No, Jacob will get late. He has to go back to his dorm in time," Helen said firmly, denying her tantrums and leaving no room for discussion. Sophie had just come from school and was in no mood to study, but she obediently climbed up the stairs to her room. Each loud thud of her footsteps made Jacob giggle. Sophie's face turned all red when she got angry, making her look adorable. She also flared her tiny nostrils while arguing, making her look even cuter. Jacob couldn't help but smile at the sight. Jacob laughed, grabbed the study material, and followed her upstairs. He didn't think of Sophie as his fiancée, but as a troublesome girl he liked being around. Unexpectedly, though, Kenneth began following them upstairs. Helen stopped him and asked, "Why are you going upstairs?" "No reason. I just like the view from the top window." Kenneth scratched his head and answered as he continued to climb. It was obvious that he was worried about leaving Sophie and Jacob alone, and so he followed them to keep an eye on Jacob. He also wanted to see how smart this mortal really was and if he could actually teach Sophie. Helen clearly knew what Kenneth was trying to do. He wanted to go upstairs to kill the mood, but she couldn't do anything about him. She sighed and left the room. Jacob followed Sophie and entered her bedroom. He turned around when he heard Kenneth following them inside and rolled his eyes. "I'm not going to eat her up," thought Jacob. Sophie didn't care about any of this. She just didn't want to study, but reluctantly sat at her desk. Jacob unzipped his bag, took out a test paper, and put it in front of her. "Let's start with this test paper." "I have a lot of assignments to do today." Sophie looked at Jacob with concern. "We can do them after this, I promise," Jacob said in an encouraging tone. "Humph." Sophie gave in. She took the test paper from him, grabbed a pen, and frowned as she got to work. Jacob had worked hard on the test paper, picking questions from a variety of other test banks to make a basic test for Sophie. He wanted to gauge how much she knew. Sophie bit the tip of the pen and did the questions one by one. Jacob dragged a chair, sat beside her, and looked at her quietly. Sophie's Uncle Kenneth sat on a chair right at the entrance of the room and watched the study session unfold. He tried to get a peek at the questions, but the grammar rules gave him a headache, and he quietly went back to his seat to glare at Jacob. Jacob ignored him and focused on Sophie. After half an hour, Sophie finished the simple test. Jacob took it from her, checked it, and within 2 minutes he discovered that Sophie's English was extremely poor. Seeing Jacob making big red marks all over her test paper, Sophie couldn't hold back. Hey, I got so many questions wrong. You have scored only 20 points out of 100, said Jacob, handing her the paper. You did it on purpose. Sophie's face went pale as she looked at her paper. Okay. Jacob took the test paper back, placed it on the table, and said, Let's officially start your class. Sophie knew she needed the help, but somehow felt embarrassed in front of Jacob. You did the second question wrong. Finish is a verb, and you need to polish it with the adverb quickly. And over here, it says that it's faster than other people, so it should be more quickly, not more quick. Jacob pointed at the second question that she got wrong and explained it to her. Sophie blushed. I know. I was careless and read it wrong. Jacob went on with his corrections. You need to use in for the proposition before the year, the month, the season, and the week. When talking about the date specifically, use on. If it's the particular arrival time, such as 5 o'clock, use at. I know this too. I wasn't paying attention, Sophie quibbled. And the fourth question. Sixth question. Seventh question. Eighth question. Jacob explained the questions, one by one, but Sophie was trying to give excuses and was slowly running out of them. She said that she read the question wrong or the question wasn't clear enough. All in all, she couldn't admit that her grammar was poor. In the end, even Kenneth couldn't sit still. He coughed 2 times and said, Soph, you need to pay more attention in class. Third uncle, his test is way too difficult. Sophie's face was red as she spoke to Kenneth. Jacob was speechless. These questions were the simplest and most basic questions for high school English. Even first-year high school students could probably answer half of the questions. Kenneth had a bad temper, but he wasn't stupid. He looked at Sophie and knew that she had a bad foundation in English. Even he couldn't help but admit, I think you need some tutoring. Third uncle, Sophie whined as her face turned red, the kind Jacob found endearing. Jacob found himself controlling his blush. Kenneth said, It's about time I leave. Your father should be back soon, Soph. I'll head back now so your father won't nag me. Third uncle, you're scared that my father will give you a lecture, aren't you? Sophie's voice seemed chirpier as she teased her uncle. Kenneth felt a bit embarrassed at what had happened earlier that afternoon and said, Anyhow, I'm going back home now. Okay, I'll see you off. Sophie jumped out of her chair. You can just walk me downstairs, Kenneth said as he walked out of Sophie's bedroom. He didn't even look at Jacob before leaving, let alone saying a goodbye. Jacob was now alone in Sophie's bedroom. He could hear Sophie's voice as she talked to her uncle. He's not as bad as you think, Uncle. He is a sweet guy. Jacob smiled on hearing these words come out of Sophie's mouth. Helen seemed to have joined the conversation as she said, Leaving, Kenneth? Dracon is almost back home. You don't want to say hi to him? I'll come to see him some other time. I just came to meet Sophie today, he replied. You're afraid that he'll say you're not working on cultivation hard enough, right? Well, drive safe on your way back, said Helen kindly. Jacob was relieved to hear the main door shut, which indicated that Kenneth had finally left. Sophie came into the room a couple of minutes later and directly began complaining. Geez, Jacob, you made me look so bad in front of third uncle. I didn't do it on purpose. You actually got the questions wrong, he said, innocently. Can't you pretend that I did them right? She looked at Jacob angrily. Jacob smiled and couldn't control his blush this time. Sophie smiled back at him. I think your third uncle hates me, Jacob confided in her. Don't take it personally. He doesn't like any mortals. Sophie understood his feelings but was terrible at consoling. Jacob didn't know what to say, but his impression towards her third uncle went down even further. He just thinks you're not a good match for me. You don't have to worry. He just says things but won't actually do anything to you. Sophie was straightforward. I actually still don't know much about you guys. What exactly was the spirit concentration scroll that Elder Liam gave me the last time? Jacob asked her. That's the most basic cultivation technique. It doesn't actually do anything. It's simply for the purification of our body. Sophie looked at Jacob. You've been cultivating for so many days now, and yet it seems like your body has had no reaction. It was now Sophie's turn to act bossy, because this was her area of expertise. Didn't we have a deal? I tutor you, and you teach me the cultivation technique. If I cultivate poorly, it means that you are a bad teacher, Jacob said immediately. Nonsense! I've never taught you before. Sophie glared back at him. Then you can start now. Jacob sat down and looked at her. He seemed sincere, and so Sophie began talking. The cultivation techniques in the Dragon Clan are divided into, these 8 levels. The highest Kyan level is also called the Heavenly level. Anyway, that's all you need to know right now. You're not even on the elementary level yet. After your body powers up to a certain level, my father or Elder Liam will pass on the real cultivation technique to you. And when you cultivate till Khan level, you will officially become a cultivator. Listening to her vague explanation, Jacob guessed that her cultivation was probably not that remarkable. In fact, Jacob was right about that. Sophie was totally uninterested in the cultivation techniques and only cultivated because she had to. But she did have an angst to prove herself, but she was just plain lazy. That was why she made a mistake the other day and fell into Jacob's arms despite Elder Liam supervising her. Jacob finally understood why Helen and Dracon wanted to punish Sophie for her carelessness. He also understood why they wanted him to spend time with her. It had more to do with just marriage. They wanted Sophie to be safe and become responsible. Keeping his thoughts aside, Jacob decided to continue with his questions. Are there any dangers for me to learn your cultivation technique? Jacob was genuinely concerned about this. Of course there are dangers. You could break your arms or legs if you fall. You could even lose your life on the spot, Sophie said in a serious, no-nonsense tone. Jacob looked scared. It's a good thing now, isn't it? You can be my replacement, and it'll be a lot easier for me, she giggled and teased Jacob. Sure, I can be your replacement. I can face all the dangers instead of you. You are marrying me anyway. I can cultivate and share the core with you. You know, when we... Jacob took out his thumbs and touched them together, giving Sophie a sly smile. Sophie proceeded to punch Jacob.
Please subscribe to the Pocket FM YouTube channel and press the bell icon for instant notification. Check out our channel for more such exciting shows.